Neville
Mhm.
Medhora, or let me introduce yourself. He
Hey.
likes optimizing things like pages, posts, emails, and happiness. And he's an advisor to companies. And he's a video creator and he's a writer. I took that straight from your Twitter bio.
I was like, that sounds very familiar.
Why write better than the man who wrote himself? But
It's always the hardest to write about yourself,
yes,
ironically. Yeah.
it is.
You're in the box. Like you talk about it so much that if I were to optimize your profile, it'd be easier than mine.
Which you did for David Perel. You optimized his profile when you had him on
Yeah, he
your
did mine.
podcast.
It's easier to do it the other way around. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny how that works. But so let's go on that.
Yeah.
The spirit of the cavalier spirit, the boyish wonder. Someone described me as having boyish wonder, and that was yesterday. But I'm curious, like from your perspective, what's the similarities today of Twitter to early blogging?
Yeah,
days?
I've got a few years on you. I think you're 27, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm 39. So I started blogging like 1999, like when you were just like literally writing HTML pages. It was way before blogs really became a thing. In fact, blogs were a bit of a joke, right? A blog was like, oh, you're like a 16-year-old girl who talks about her eggs in the morning or something like that. It was kind of a joke. And so no one really made money blogging or anything like that. And there weren't that many people on the internet. There's like 30 million people in the world on the internet.
Wow.
So it was kind of a small place at the time compared to now. And I remember I was one of the first crop of these financial bloggers that sprung up. It was like me, Ramit Sethi was like a financial blogger. There's all these like My Money blog. There's this guy, there's all these different people that were part of this early fintech, like not fintech, but like financial blogging thing. And it was this interesting spirit where like a web page was just this stupid thing. Like SEO didn't really enter people's minds or anything. And so you'd link people and be like, hey, check out what Danny did on his page and look at what this person did. And you all meet up, and then there'd be these things called like FinCon where there's these meetups. Everyone met each other. It was really fun. And I could just be glamorizing my youth or something, but I remember that being a very like collaborative spirit because no one had anything to gain.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of money in it, right? So if anyone made any money, it was like a very small amount from something. But then SEO started becoming more of a mature industry. So people were more stingy with their links, and they started thinking about how can I put AdSense and getting more people to my site, not their site. It became a little bit competitive. And so that kind of removed a lot of the fun. Nowadays, I think with Twitter, like there's this like online world where everyone's just there and they're sharing their thoughts, ideas on Twitter in text. And then there's this online world like Instagram where they're sharing with videos and images and TikTok, et cetera. There's all these different communities with different vibes, right? So Instagram is like far more women, and then Twitter's like all dudes. And like, there's like definite distinctive vibes, and it almost reminds you of like different cities.
Oof.
And you can participate in these different cities as you choose. I'm a nerd. I love like San Francisco kind of vibe where, it's 85% dudes and almost half of them are autistic. Like I love that vibe. That's my people. And that's what Twitter is.
Yeah.
And so it's fun nowadays to be able to participate in some of these networks if you use them right, if you just filter out the negative noise that you don't want. And so it's been kind of fun lately to play online. And I kind of joke around with some people. I'm like, I would like my job to just fuck around on Twitter all day. And that's my job. It'd be fun if that was my job. And I'm kind of making that the case right now. And it just really reminds me of this old school era of blogging and collaboration and fun, or you see like some guy, just like a developer that's like thinking of quitting his job, developing a small SaaS on the side, and you comment on his stuff and follow him and like have interactions. And it's like, it doesn't matter how high or low you are. It's just everyone's just like trying to support each other, have fun. It kind of reminds me of that.
Well, you hosted a Twitter party last night. That was amazing. Yeah. And it was very much in the spirit of like, this is very much Austin spirit as well, which is like, we're all in it together. Everyone's open. Everyone's trying to be friends with everyone. It's like college freshman year where no one has any preconditions and has Austin always felt that way, or is it always been like that?
It's been like
that
a college type of town. Yeah. Like on the up and up. It's always been a little bit like that. I have a whole family in Houston, so that's one of the main reasons I live in Austin. I think Austin's awesome. But Austin's always had that college-y vibe. Yeah, so it's definitely different than New York, different than San Francisco. It's just different. Each city is different, much like each network is different.
Yeah.
And the Twitter party was pretty interesting because it was like taking the city online and putting it in real life. And everyone had this common thread. And Nick Gray, who kind of like, I call him like the conductor of the party. He's like my co-host. He said an interesting thing. He's like, I think this might have been one of the best parties, which is a compliment from him because he's the party master.
So did hundreds.
Yeah.
He was just on the podcast.
I know. And he does parties from thousands to 2. I mean, it's crazy. And so it was interesting because it was all tied together with that Twitter thread. Like everyone there was active on Twitter to some degree, right? And so you all had at least this one thing in common. Whereas you go to a normal party, it's like, oh, you all just live in the same city, which is a loose connection, but a connection. So the Twitter thing was cool because everyone had seen each other or interacted together online.
Yeah, and then it's cool now, like, after the party, you tweeted all of us together, so we have some connection. So I could be like, oh, I know this person, I know this person. Oh, that was that person. Wow, interesting.
Yeah.
And what did you learn from hosting the party about Twitter or about friends or about people? That was the first time you've ever done something like that.
That was the first time I did it on Twitter.
Gotcha.
And one of the there was a couple of reasons I did it. Someone was asking me, they're like, what's like, is there like an ask or something like that?
An ulterior motive.
Yeah, and I'd say there's like a spectrum of things. One, I thought it was fun. Two, like Nick likes hosting these parties, and he was going to co-host with me, and it always puts me at ease that like he's so good at it that everything's just taken care of.
He's a craftsman.
Yeah, like he'll send out the pre-invite, and he has assistants that go and research everyone's LinkedIn, and then put a bio and like put their social links. So I don't have to do that. So that was kind of nice. The other thing is it's cheap. I mean, I probably spent $100 for food and mainly just sparkling water is what everyone mainly drinks, and then also, it's just like I talk to these people all the time, and I'm like, they're in Austin. Like, why don't I just meet them and do it all at one time and see, who you vibe with, and maybe some people you don't, some people you do. So I invited everyone over, and it was great. Like, I don't know, just seeing the face that you see on the internet and then like the real person, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like online and offline are melding. I don't think there's a distinction anymore. People are like, 40% of couples meet online. It's like, they just meet. I don't think that there's any difference anymore, right? Or if you go to a party, it's like social media probably paid some effect to that party. It was started on a Facebook invite. It was started on a WhatsApp group, whatever. It started online, ended up offline. I think it's all just, it's like merged.
Yeah.
Now.
And I think that would have been called weird 10 years ago to create a party from people you meet online. But today, it feels to me normal. What do you think in 10 years that we look at as weird today is going to be normal?
Oh, I think looking at screens, like you've got a laptop open. I got a screen on my phone that's 5.5 inches big. Whereas I think with AR and VR, it's just apparently obvious that the steps are being taken to where in front of your eyes, you can make anything a large screen or immersive, right? So now we look at a 2D web page, but in the future, you could like swipe a block over there instead of a cursor. I don't know, all sorts of weird things. But I play VR every once in a while. I'm a fan of it. It still sucks in its current form, but it's getting there. Like you could just see like, okay, if they improve the pixel rate, if they improve the field of vision, it's just going to get better and better to where instead of me looking at you and being like, what's his name again? How old is he? Imagine there's like a little icon floating above your head that says Danny Miranda, 27 years old. Like
imagine like has your follower count and all this weird stuff too. Like
that's a total thing. Yeah. It's going to be an overlay on life. So all the stuff you see, like imagine 3D Tinder.
Yeah.
Right. You go to a bar. So instead of swiping on your phone at home alone, you go to a bar and everyone else who's on it, it'll say like Amanda, 32, single. And you can go talk to her right there. So I think the merging of those two worlds is going to be the next. And the fact that we have this like online, offline hybrid right now is going to be silly.
I think in our first conversation, episode 71, I believe it was, or episode 70, we ended up having a huge discussion about the future as well. But I'm curious, like, why do you think you're so interested in the future to begin with? Like, what about technology attracts you so deeply?
I mean, I think it's like where you're going. Well, one, I mean, maybe partially I just don't want to be left behind, right? I always try to think, I planned my retirement date at 50 years old. And the reason is I think at that age, I won't have maybe the mental capacity or the drive to compete with someone young, right? And so I want to make sure that like I'm set by then, so I don't have to work if I don't want to. Just because as you get older, you get a little bit slower, you get a little, or you just don't care. Maybe you have kids, and that's more important than learning about new technologies. So one, I'm fascinated by it. Two, it's I guess like what Steve Jobs said. Anything that's like sufficiently advanced seems like magic. And so the first time you put on a VR headset, you're like, what in the hell? Like, you're like in a different place. And then you take it off and it's a shocking moment that like, I'm in a different place. And you're like, the world's going to change. And like the third time you do it, you're kind of used to it. And you're like, oh yeah, I can see where the applications of this are going. And how can I be more productive and use that to my advantage? And I think that's why I like technology stuff. Or, I mean, honestly, there's some days when it's like 11:30 a.m. I'm still just sitting in bed, like on my laptop. And I'm like, this is what I do for work. Like this is what I do for work. This is like the dream. This is everyone's dream. And that's because I know technology a little bit better than others.
Yeah, I also feel like from getting to know you, getting to know your stuff, you have like a baseline of gratitude that exists on everything that you're saying. Like, oh, I'm grateful to be in this moment. Like I see your tweets sometimes and it's like, it's so crazy that we're living in this reality with internet and how cool is this basically? Like this is the best time
Yeah.
ever. And I feel like a lot of people don't. Like I said something similar when I was just getting a burger with somebody yesterday. It's like, yo, this is crazy. Like we're here, we're getting a burger, like we didn't do anything. We just paid money for this thing and it just came to us. Like what is going on? And he was like, dude, I've never thought about the world like that. What do you think allows us to have that perspective? I guess.
I mean, I know exactly what it is for me. I used to go to India all the time. My parents are from India. I was born in the United States, but I remember going there as a young person, 30 plus years ago, and it was a legit third world country at the time. India was a legit third world country. I don't know how else to nicely say it. It was not great.
Yeah. No.
And I remember thinking, like, I look like people there. Like I'm like of the same DNA roughly. Of people there. It's just that my dad decided to make the leap and go to Berkeley in the 70s. And for that, I was born here.
Wow.
Right? So no thanks to me, thanks to them. And so for that reason, we go to India and I'm just like, wow, like their currency sucks. Like I have 70 times more money just because, I don't know, their government's fucking old. I didn't know about it back then. I just knew that like I could afford anything in India and they could never afford like a car wash in my country. It was like that. And I remember just going there and seeing like the lives people lead and that is so normal. And that just like people, you wake up in the morning and shit in the field. And like, and it's like, I don't even feel sympathy for it anymore because I'm so used to it. But it's just like, that is how a lot of people live. And to be honest, like that's just what they know. And so they're happy with it. They're fine. They're still enjoying it. And I remember thinking, I was just like, wow, if I had to trade, I would not. I would rather go back to the United States with all the fancy shit I have and all the opportunity I have. And now with the internet, I think India has leveled out and parts of India are like kind of first world. It's quite remarkable to change thanks to the internet, in my opinion. But what happened, I remember my parents would bring National Geographic magazines for my cousins. And I'd be like, that we're bringing National Geographic's like in our suitcase on a plane. Like what is this about? And it's like, because they just couldn't get that there. And I remember thinking like, you can't get that. We bring tinfoil for some of our cousins because they couldn't get tinfoil there. I mean, now of course you can get all this stuff, but it's like that put me in a mindset of like, oh, the United States is great. And everywhere we went across the world, I was just like, I still like the United States better. And so that made me see the other side, that like the whole, like all this stuff, this fancy stuff, this air conditioning, all this stuff, like not having our heads cut off right now. That's all hard fought. Like someone fought hard to get that because human existence before this was brutal and short and terrible. And every day you were fighting for your life. Yeah. And then like there was a whole slew of diseases. People thought like God was in control of you dying because of a parasite. We just didn't know all that stuff. And now we do. And it's like, I thank all the people before us that found out those things the hard way. And then I get to live this cushy life, 11:30 a.m., safe, warm, in bed, playing on Twitter and having fun. That's my life. Yeah, I'd rather take this than back then.
100%. Yeah. But I look at I'm sure you do this for your website as well. I look at the podcast stats sometimes and see all the countries that I've never been in that people are listening to the podcast. And I'm like, yo, this is so crazy to me. Like, the entire world, like all these countries, place I've never been. So my question is like, what would you say to somebody who like wants to go to America or wants to go to the US, but finds themselves in a situation that is like you're describing in India, like they're not happy. Maybe they are happy. Maybe they're happier than some parts of the US.
I would say that happiness has nothing to do with
where you're living.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, look, wealth is always going to make it easier to be happy, of course.
Right.
But I've seen people in villages that are 80 years old and have to carry straw on their head to make like 2 rupees a day to survive.
Yeah.
But like they're still like smiling and laughing about the same amount. And I would actually argue something other than that. I don't think it's so much wealth that makes you happy. It's just like the people and surroundings. So like a lot of people over there, they don't have big houses because they just can't. And they live all together with their family. And there's always stuff going on and the grandma's around kids and stuff all day. And it's kind of a fun lifestyle. It's kind of a fun lifestyle. Yeah. So I'd rather be with all my homies in a trailer home, a trailer park in Mobile, Alabama, if I had all my friends and family around, rather than like a villa in Spain by myself, right? So I think it's just like, it's something else. But yeah, money sure does help, of course.
Yeah. But like, why have you focused so strongly, do you think, on happiness in particular as like one of the core pillars that you're chasing?
Well, I always explain it simply. It's like, would I rather be happy or sad? It's two choices in my head.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'd rather be the happy thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, wouldn't most people?
Yeah, but why do you think we choose sadness so often? Not we, but why do you think people
I
choose sadness?
haven't had like a big problem with it throughout my life. And I think a big part of it and a large part of it is luck. And so as I've grown older, I feel a lot of people, like, they have divorced parents. They have all sorts of crazy traumas and attacks on them when they were young and all sorts of stuff. I just didn't have that. I had great parents that provided that life. So I think, first of all, I'm in maybe top 90 percentile of, like, you know, good parents and just luck in life. So I think probably a lot of that. Yeah. And then also I've studied it. I mean, I read a lot. This might be a little bit of a tangent, but like in high school, I was just reading every book I could. And I read 3 books on male midlife crises. And there was one specifically called The Male Midlife Crisis by Nancy something. I forgot the name. It was written in the 70s. She was a therapist, and she interviewed hundreds of men who've gone through male midlife crises and wrote about them. And as you can imagine, there's like specific patterns that happened. And so I thought, well, what an interesting thing. I can see the future. Like, I'm like, you know, 15 right now, whatever. But I know that I'll be middle-aged at some point, right? The march of time goes on. And how can I avoid going what these men went through? And so I started reading, and you started noticing the same thing. Like, they got married way too young. That was a common one. I don't know what to say, but they just got married way too young. And then what happens is they have kids. And you always think of yourself as young, but then one day, like, your 5-year-old looks up at you, you're like, Daddy, you're like 100. And you're like, oh shit, I'm old. Like, I'm the old one. And at the same time, when you're middle-aged, your parents are often decaying or dying. And so you think, well, I'm next. And so the male in this case, the point of this book was that in middle age, someone who got married too young, didn't get to explore the world, had kids really early, and then has financial pressures on this side from the kids, and also has financial pressures from that side from the parents, and all these forces tugging on them, they snap. That's the time in their life that they break. And I remember thinking, oh, you can avoid this by maybe just getting married later, or there's certain ways you could avoid that fate.
It's funny because expectation and reality start to differ around 25 or 30, where what you think 30 will feel like and what it actually is, by the studies have shown, it's the greatest gap, and then it goes down and down. I don't know when it starts to peak up again, but this is on average, and I thought that was interesting. So it's similar to the 30.
Yeah, but it's like you kind of tell the future. Like, most of our lives are not that different.
Yeah.
Right? Most of our lives are like, you try to make money in your 20s, you hustle hard, you work hard, and then you have a family, then you like concentrate on that. And by the end, you're just like, I just want to drink tea and read the newspaper. Right? It's just like, it's kind of a similar pattern. And I don't think that I'm going to like be much different from that. And so for that reason, I think I was able to avoid certain things like that by just reading people's stories. Yeah.
Have you used that in business or in dating and any other parts of your life?
I mean, dating for sure. Yeah.
What have you read? What have you learned?
Well, I thought I started planning my life out backwards. I think I've been exposed to a little bit more death than most people, not so much in my own family, at least in, not in my early life.
Yeah.
But I remember going to India. That was one of the formative things of just like seeing old people being kept alive. And like a lot of Indian cultures are very superstitious. They're like, if you take your own life with like, assisted suicide, that you'll come back as a cockroach or something like that. There's this reincarnation belief that I'm not into. But I remember thinking like, they should just let this person die. Like, why are they keeping them alive? It's just a burden on the younger people. And then also this person's like praying like, God, take me, da da da. I'm like, why don't they just kill her? What are you doing? Let this person go in dignity, right? Like we do it with dogs. How come a human can't do it? In fact, it's illegal in a lot of places. And so I was exposed to death on that front. I did a program where you wanted to become a doctor in high school. You got to shadow 10 different doctors over the course of 2 years. And a couple of the places were geriatric hospitals and in Alzheimer's wards for stage 3 and 4 Alzheimer's. 3 and 4? Yeah, something like that, which basically means you're almost dead. And so in that time, like I was volunteering there, we saw many people die.
Wow.
And you also, what I most resented was you'd see these people with a very advanced Alzheimer's. And sorry if this is a touchy topic for anyone, but what I saw was these people and their families would come and they'd be like, Dad, do you recognize me? And you're like, oh, their brains are mush by this point. And in my opinion, that person is already dead. It's just this living sack of cells that's still existing. And I remember just like seeing the burden on the living part of that equation, right? So I feel bad for the person that's experiencing it, but also the living part of the family, that anytime they're just going to get this text message that or a phone call that the parent's going to die. And then also the financial burden, and then also like their kids' burden. And so I remember thinking, like, wouldn't it be better if everyone just kind of like at a certain time just said, look, I'm going to check out. You know, I'm going to donate my body to science, give away whatever organs, kidneys, eyes, anything. Anyone can have it. I'm done. And just go. And so I determined the end of my life to be November 17th, 2067, my 85th birthday. I'm done. That's it. So with the exception of some really, really big advancement, that is my planned to go date. And so I've always thought, well, before then, I better pack it all in, right? And you have to remember, if you plan your life backwards, let's say you want to hike Mount Everest. There's not a lot of 80-year-olds doing that, right? I'm sure there's some weird guy that did it, but for the most part, there's not a lot. But right now, when you're young and able to do that and endure that hardship, you should probably do that if that's your goal. And so I remember thinking, like, it's not good to just plan the end of the life, but even like a step backwards. Like, what do you want to do by the time you're 60? Because once you hit 60, I mean, your body's not going to be like a 20-year-old's, right? So it's like, what do you want to do before then and before then and before then? And I planned it all backwards. And that was a real reassuring thought. It seems, I've talked to so many people about this. They find it morbid. And I just don't find it that way. I don't know why. And I think it's made me happier to know that, like, that's the end. And if I'm having a bad day, I'm like, well, I think I'm going to die then. So I better like use this wisely, right?
Like I could choose sad or happiness, even if something bad happened.
Exactly. And I think there are ways to hack your brain into being happy. So, yeah.
What ways do you use to hack your brain into being happy?
Oh man, you've interviewed Noah, right? One of my best friends, Noah Kagan. I think partially this is genetic. Okay, so I'm pretty sure there's a genetic component to this. I'm also pretty sure, and this is just from anecdotal evidence. So God, and I think everyone's still confused about this. I think testosterone level is going to be a huge, like, obvious factor in the future. I think. People I know with higher testosterone that have tested it are generally happier, and the ones with lower testosterone generally have more depressive episodes. Anecdotally, in my own life, this is what I've observed. I don't know if that's true or not. So that's another thing. And then also, your brain is a neural network. You know how a neural network works? That you feed it in 1 million images of cats, it's able to identify a cat. Well, imagine you fed that same neural network a bunch of images of horror and terror and blah, blah, blah. What's it going to output? Like bad shit.
That's why I don't understand people who watch scary movies.
Some people love it. I can't do it.
I don't understand. Like it doesn't do anything for me. 2, you're feeding your brain the very thing that is going to make it more scared, more harmful, more depressed.
That's
doesn't
what I
make
think.
sense.
Because I tell people I don't watch scary movies. I could do it.
Yeah,
okay, I could do it. I
course.
could sit through. I know it's fake. But at the same time, I'm like, why would I want that necessarily? And so I watch stuff like Seinfeld all the time. And I like Seinfeld particularly because it's a show with no lessons. It's just all stupid. It's just all dumb, all jokes the whole time. There's no lessons. There's no like heartwarming section from them all. And they're all bad people. It's hilarious. And so if you feed your brain happy stuff, you often get like happy back.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just the way you approach the world. And so if you feed your brain a lot of like, I don't know, knowledge about math, like, you know, math better, right? It's pretty simple in my opinion. So I think you can hack happiness in that way. Also, just like cut out all the negative people, you know, all that kind of stuff. Like if someone's a bummer, just be like, okay, but I don't want to be part of that bummer.
Yeah. So on that point, I'm not saying that Noah Kagan is a bummer. Noah Kagan's an amazing guy, but he deals, and he's spoken on the podcast about the trauma, like his depressive episodes or him being anxious. And so, like, how do you differentiate between a negative person and someone who's really anxious? And not let the anxious person get you down and want, because you're obviously very close to Noah. So
yeah, I mean, sometimes I have boundaries with it.
Yeah,
and like we know, we joke all the time. First of all, Noah's great most of the time, and he does have these some episodes. One, I'm a good friend, so I'm not gonna like abandon my friend if he's just sad for some reason. So I'm happy to talk. However, he also knows that I have a limit to it, right?
What's the limit?
Friends. It's just like if there's constant stuff, there are other people he can go to that probably understand him better. At some point, I'm not well enough equipped to handle someone who's sad more than a certain amount because I don't know that world. I don't know how to handle it. And so he also knows and respects that I have a limit for that stuff. And that's just the way it goes.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I wish I could help him more in those times, but if I can't, I don't know what to do.
I think Sam Parr said to Noah, you go to therapy so you can live like Neville Medhora.
I think therapy, like, I don't want to knock therapy.
Go for it.
Yeah.
You have a hot take on therapy, I think.
It's not a knock on therapy. I think therapy is fantastic, and I think it teaches you all sorts of tools. I think there are some people that depend on it too much, though. And I think there is something about being mentally tough. Like, okay, so Noah's like, but don't you get sad? I'm like, well, sure, I get sad, but I also know that like I won't be sad later, right? So there's some of that, and then once again, I'm sure there's like a genetic component of it that's just insurmountable.
Yeah,
that there's partially that, and then I also think testosterone.
I think you just have
you noticed this? The more I talk about it with people, I'm like, the people with higher testosterone, not some abnormal limit, but like normal, seem to be like kind of happier.
Yeah,
right.
It makes sense to me. Yeah, no, it does make. Think about like the most manly dudes. They're not upset, they're not depressed, and
they get sad, but I think it's just less prone to like depressive episodes.
Yeah, I think that.
So I still don't think we totally 100% understand what it is, but also I think just ruminating on bad things more often, like letting yourself go there. Like I'm sure everyone gets this. It's like a brain spiral where you're at home alone, you're kind of like down, you're just like, I bet my friends hate me. And then you're like, what would happen if like Danny just never called me back? I'd be like, I'd do this to him. You start thinking that, and you just go down the spiral, and then like you just have to catch yourself and be like, what am I doing? Like none of this happened. This is all fake. And so my answer to that is like, okay, go for a walk, like get out of the environment you're in. So there are tricks like that you can use, but then again, I think I've come from a good family and had a good upbringing and all that, and that is a major factor in that. So I'm not advised to tell anyone how to be happy. Yeah,
that's the greatest privilege in the world.
Totally.
That I've also experienced, of coming from a good family who loves you and appreciates you. It's like after no one could say anything to me. No one could say anything to you. Really, that could get us so upset because we just have that as the backbone of our reality.
Totally.
And we know how to give ourselves love because we received it so often.
Yeah, it wasn't even a problem. Although I will say I follow certain Instagram accounts. There's a lady named Stephanie Rigg who I told Noah about, and he interviewed her. Some Australian lady who had just like I don't even know if she's a therapist or anything, but she has just these ways of like, if you have anxious, avoidant attachment style, and there's a lot of people that talk about that, but she was particularly good. And I remember just like reading some of her stuff and being like, dude, I do that like thing, maybe not extreme like some people, but. And then she'll be like, this is how you solve it. And you're like, holy shit, she just said it right there. Like we have these like knowledge tools in order to like tune up our brain now that we didn't have before.
Yeah. And we also have access to more information, more perspectives, more ideas. Like you read 3 books when you were in high school and like the internet wasn't what it is today. It's like you could get 300 books basically summarized about happiness in, not to say that more information is necessarily better, but more information gives more perspectives, which can help you.
It also has the evil dark twin,
which
which is like you can fall into this victim mentality all the time, and it's just like anyone like that goes nowhere. Like it's just so obvious. And the people that are like, well, yeah, I was born in a fucked up situation, but like I'm gonna get out, and I know the way out. I'm gonna do it. Those are the type of people that help themselves and stuff. That succeed. So there is this other dark side of online where you can start following people that are kind of a drag, and you just have to unfollow them. I don't know what to do. Just block them.
One thing that I do and that I talked about on this podcast is create a new account entirely. So you don't necessarily have to unfollow people, but if you're on Instagram, you have all your high school friends and you're getting dreams of your high school friend's ex-boyfriend that you've never met, like. Yeah, like you shouldn't know what that person looks like if you've never met them. And sometimes that's going on in our head. So the way around that, so you don't have to unfollow every single person, just start a new Instagram account or just start a new Twitter, whatever it is, the toxic environment. If you can notice it, you can start a new account.
Interesting. I think my Facebook is like that because it's just like legacy friends from like college, and you
know what I'm talking about though.
Yeah, totally.
Like what someone's wife looks like, and you've never met that person.
I know. I'm like, why am I looking at this story? Yeah, like my Instagram, because Instagram's so like crazy addictive. You watch those stories, I have to just remove people that I'm not close to. I'm like, I'm sorry, I just can't do it unless I'm learning something from them.
Yeah. So that's your filter. Like if you're learning something from them, they can stay.
It's like what's the input that you're putting in your brain? And that's going to be the output. It's that simple.
Yeah.
Is mostly good shit going in? Okay, then you'll be mostly happy. And if there's a lot of bad stuff going in, bad stories in your head, hanging around people that are also kind of negative, like what do you think is going to happen? It's very obvious to me. And so that's why I have boundaries with people. Like I think people kind of know that like if they're having a really tough time, maybe I'm not saying I'm not going to be a good friend, but also like there is a limit. I think I can help you because my advice is like, just be happier. It's not good advice, right? It's not good. Or even this kind of advice of like, put more happy stuff in your brain. Like that's not good advice.
I think it's good advice.
I think.
I mean, it's good advice for me. You know, like if you told me that, I'd be like, okay, I will.
Yeah.
Like I'll start a new account, or I'll start like actually writing. Like I love myself, which is something that I've done many times when I felt upset or just felt neutral and wanted to get to a better place. I literally wrote, I love myself over and over and over again for days and weeks and months because I'm feeding myself love to myself. So that's the output that comes out as well.
That was a Kamal Ravikant book, right?
Yes.
He wrote that little tiny book.
And
that inspired my book, that tiny book. Yeah.
So you wrote a book? I found that when I was doing
in
the Google
2013.
search.
This book will teach you how to write better. Kamal Ravikant wrote a book called How to Love Yourself. Oh, Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It.
Exactly.
That's what it was called.
You got it.
And it was like 45 pages. And I was blown away. So I didn't resonate with the message as much. The point was like, say, I love yourself. And so many people liked it.
Yes, I loved it.
So I know him and I talked to him about his book. And he said he wrote like a PDF on the story.
It was originally a blog post.
Yes, that's correct. And then it just turned into a book and kind of blew up on its own. And I remember thinking like, I read it and like, it cost $5. I read it in like 30 minutes or less. I was like, you know, like I feel like I got my money's worth, right? Like I got the point. It was not longer than it needed to be.
Yeah.
And I really respected that. And I actually modeled my book. This book will teach you how to write better after that book. In fact, it's the same dimension, 6x9. It's got the same glossy cover and it's got the same amount of pages.
Wow.
I totally modeled it off of his book. Yeah.
And so what do you write about? Like how do someone write better if you remember from 10 years ago, basically?
Yeah. So we had this thing called the Copywriting Course and it had different chapters. It was like roughly 10 different like lessons. And I just made the chapters those lessons. So like punctuation isn't as important. And then like telling a story or getting the envelope test, this famous thing Gary Halbert did of like, if your mom sends you an envelope, but it has like not a lot of stuff on it, just says mom, you probably open it, right? So it's like the sender is actually the most important thing. And so it had a couple of different little things like that. And so the goal was if there's like a salesperson sitting down to write a cold email, they could read it and flip through it in like less than 30 minutes. I mean, it shouldn't take you more than 30 minutes to read. And I tried to make it free, but you have to charge for a book. So it's like $5. And I put that out as just kind of a thing and it still sells to this day.
Wow.
It's kind of, yeah. I'd like to redo it at some point. Still keep it short, but like, yeah, redo it.
I think it's so cool. You mentioned Copywriting Course. That is something that you started how long ago?
Officially, I think it was like 2011 it was started. 2012 it was released through AppSumo, just as a course. It wasn't like a business.
It's 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And now it's like I respect and admire anyone who's still doing something that they started 10 years ago, if it's a good thing. You know, like,
yeah.
You know, like you could be Hitler and do bad things for more than 10 years. But like, you know what I mean?
Oh, you took it there.
That's where my mind went.
Nice analogy.
But you start a business and it helps people and it's really good and you're still doing it 10 years later. Like that's an amazing thing. And I think it speaks to your long-term mindset and the ability to plan. Did you think when you started it that you would do it for so long?
No, I never had a clue. I always thought I would do something random in life. I always thought that. In fact, in college, a lot of people did PPA. It was like this program where you get a master's in accounting and you say, I'm going to get hired by a big four and then 10 years later make partner. And they knew their whole lives. And like, I know I've planned my life backwards in terms of like the death date and stuff, but what it's going to entail, I actually don't know and prefer not to know to some degree, right?
Life needs a little bit of what is going to happen? When is it going to happen?
Well, not everyone does. Actually, some people really loved that they had that life plan.
Yeah, you're right.
I just didn't. And that was just the way I was, and that's the way they were. And that both are fine.
You're right.
And so I was like, I like a little bit of a little intrigue. And so I always thought like I'd probably do something weird. I mean, at the time I started, I was like right before that I was running a rave company. I'd never been to a rave in my life.
House of Rave.
Yeah. So it was kind of random. I think my path has been like that. And then a copywriting course kind of hit and it was kind of fun. It was just like people liked the service. They were paying me money. And then also I get to just do what I like to do, which is like write junk on the internet.
Well, what is Copywriting Course for those who are unfamiliar? And how has it changed throughout the years? And what's the latest iteration that you're excited about?
Yeah, it teaches you how to write better. And what that means is like a lot of people have to write web pages, emails, tweets, all sorts of stuff, write scripts, cold emails, outreach, all that kind of stuff. And so we just said, well, there's usually a better way to do this. So for example, a lot of people write really long cold emails and get no response. And we'll be like, what if you made that 2 sentences, right? It would sound more personal and people would more likely respond. And so I was doing a lot of email sending. We're sending out emails for AppSumo, sending out emails for my own list. I helped send out emails for like The Hustle and stuff like that. And so for all those things, I got the idea like, well, we could just teach other people how to do this. So people would read, originally copywriters copywriting course came out of AppSumo. So we were sending these emails out with sales pitches at the end of each one. And every single email we're sending you is a pitch to buy a product, okay? Like, you know that when you sign up, but at the same time, we're trying to sell you something. Yet, I was just like, how can we make this in a way that's like benefit? It's a win-win-win. It's a win for AppSumo. It's a win for me. It's a win for you. How can I also teach you some stuff and then sell you, right? So I came up with the concept I call like 70% content, 30% selling. That was the ratio, which I think you could stick to every single message you ever send, that no one will hate you for it. Because if you just send like, I want to sell you this, I want to sell you this, people are like, all right, that's a lot. I'm going to unsubscribe. But if 70% of each email was just learning or discovering something new, then it wouldn't be that big of a deal. So I tell the example, like imagine you go to CarMax to buy a car. You're like, hey, I'd like to buy this Toyota Camry. And the guy's like, I could get you in this car right now. Let's go. Let's sign the papers. You're like, dude, that's way too hard. Instead, the guy's like, hey, man, we didn't even work on commission. I'm over here. If you need me, I've owned 3 generations of Toyota Camrys. I know everything about this car. I've sold 1,000 of them. If you want questions, test drive, I'm your guy. My name's Neville. And then you just pick around and then say, hey, Neville, can I ask you questions? He answers questions. At the end, he's like, you know, if you'd like to, we can get you in the car. You wouldn't be like, whoa. You just be like, oh, that was helpful of him. So I always like to think like, how can I be like not the used car pushy salesman, but the used car nice salesman? Like you could sell used cars in a good way. And so I always wanted to be that person. And so I applied that to emails, like respecting someone's inbox and time. That like, if I'm going to sell you something, I'm also going to teach you something. So even if you don't buy it, you'll still read it. That was the ultimate goal. If they still read every single email we sent out, then later when they are ready to buy whatever said product, they're still reading. Versus if we're only selling them, they may just ignore our emails, which is the worst thing that can happen. So that's where Copywriting Course came out of. All these business owners would say, Neville, I'm reading your emails, but you're selling me something. Why am I doing it? And I would respond back, it's this thing called copywriting, And I was like, okay, we should probably formalize this into a course and sell it. And it was a big hit.
And how has it changed throughout the years?
So over the years, I think as a course creator, what happens is so I'm sure you know a lot of people that sell digital courses.
Of course.
What happens is also the tools have changed, right? YouTube was not what it was. YouTube was more like a video hosting platform back then. And now it's like you can learn anything. So there's competition from that. What you can do now is, so what people do is they release a course and they go, whoa, this is easy money. This is great. Then they release another course. And then they release another one. But here's the thing. If I sell you a course on copywriting, email writing, and autoresponder writing, it's all the same thing. It's all roughly the same with some differences. And so what happened was at a certain point, I had so many courses that it got confusing. So then what course creators do, they bundle. So they put them all together or like certain ones together and they sell those as a bundle. And then what a lot of people do is, recurring income is the holy grail of all income. Everyone likes steady recurring income. You know what you're going to make next month and you just build that, right? So then people go into a membership model. And there's multiple ways you can do that. So we have gone to a membership model with a community. And one of the biggest things people wanted whenever we did Copywriting Course was kind of some live help. So I started offering office hours. And then there's only so many times a week I can get on the phone with all these people. And so I made like a forum, like we have a custom forum. You actually post your copy and just get writers to like rewrite parts of it. So for a lot, like if it's, 3:00 in the morning and I'm not around, you could post it there and someone's going to answer, which is pretty cool. And so we've changed to that type of model over the years. And that's been awesome. Yeah. The community model is good if you could pull it off.
And that's the model that you'd like to stay with for the foreseeable future?
I think you're going to see a lot more people move to that model. And you're going to see what happens. So it used to be fragmented communities in the early aughts, like 2000s. There's those little forums, like VW Bug Forum. And then what happened was Facebook groups. Facebook groups made a worse forum, but far better in terms of everyone was just on it. There was no like you have to log in and people had shitty security. It just did everything for you and allowed you to make comments and see who the people were. So the network effect of Facebook groups was extraordinarily powerful, better than any forum. But then what happened is now you're on Facebook and it's just like your reach goes down over time. Unless you have to have a really popular group that someone goes to. It doesn't just get shown in your feed. And so there's also more software out there to support groups like Circle.so and such. And so now you can make your own little group. So for example, you have this podcast and what happens is people listen to it and then like have really no place to go. Imagine if you had like a Circle.so community or something like that. People could go and like talk about the show and you see who they are and you own that content. That's the big thing. Whereas with Facebook, you don't technically own all the content.
Yeah, I like setting up the community in the YouTube comment section, but it's so fragmented because the YouTube comment section, it's Twitter, it's Instagram. I get messages all over. and I'm like, oh, I wish it could just be in
So
one place.
the problem is just tech there.
Yeah.
Right. So the tech is getting better. There were no good forum softwares out there. Now there's like starting to get better stuff here and there. So the technology is coming, and you are going to see this the fragmentation of communities again. But the other thing, the other hope for it is that the whole Web3 thing comes through. And so my dream, everyone in the world has like some sort of phone number, but on Ethereum, like the Ethereum network, right? There's some common identifier that anyone in the world can pull from and join. So I have a fragmented copywriting community. Imagine we could tie it to yours. So someone with clout in mind can trade their clout for yours, that kind of thing. That's going to be like the Web3. We're not quite there yet, but that will happen in the next 5-10 years. It's already happening. It's just slow.
Have you heard of Urbit?
Yes. What is that again?
Or maybe it's Urbit.
It's Urbit, I believe.
I'm so sorry for those at Urbit. But I just had Justin Murphy in here, who's a big Urbit user, and he was explaining to me how you can use one login to access a bunch of different sources and different places. And I don't fully understand it because he just explained it to me, and I got to look into it. But it sounded like
it's happening.
A solution.
The point is, it's happening.
Yeah.
So that might not be the solution, it may be the solution, but like the point is, it's starting to happen.
Yeah.
So I think you'll see all these fragmented communities and then like jumping between communities, which you haven't seen before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's not in the interest of Twitter or Facebook or YouTube to let you use your clout in one place in a different place.
It kind of is. Actually, it's kind of funny. Like Twitter and Facebook, to be fair, did the first of this. They were kind of the innovators of it, where you could log in with a single sign-on through Facebook, because Facebook had your profile image, email, that like all the important information you need for like logging on to a new community. And so you remember Facebook was the first to like do like that sign on with Facebook. So a lot of communities, instead of like typing in your name and your email and all that jazz, you just sign in with your Facebook or now Google or your Apple, anything, whatever, all that single sign-on stuff, and you can just sign on. So that's a step in the right direction, but it doesn't mean you could transfer. Like if someone has like, 10 points in the Danny Miranda community, you can't come to Copywriting Course and transfer that clout.
Yeah.
Whereas in the future, you'll be able to somehow have an exchange and come over.
Similar to Reddit, how Reddit's does it exchange?
I think like DeFi is the word. Yeah. So like imagine you have a bunch of Reddit karma. You have 600 Reddit karma. Well, why can't I go to Twitter and say, hey, I'm a real person that like participates in communities? With Twitter, if you log on for the first time, now you're starting at the very bottom. Like, wouldn't it be nice if you could take some of your clout from this community and transfer it over to this community?
Yeah. Yeah. That is the future.
Yeah.
Well, I have some tweets here I want to talk to you about.
Yeah, totally.
One of them is the Lex Fridman Elon Musk tweet that went absolutely bonkers.
Yeah.
and just it was cool because I caught that right when it came out. So I was getting the secondhand dopamine from your success.
Yeah.
Because I commented on it. I don't even know what I commented on it, but what was impactful about that and what was cool was you created some new content based on something that was already created, and you made it original in a way of like you put captions in and you put a timer, but explain it, what you did there.
Yeah, there was this moment where I was watching. I love Lex Fridman as an interviewer. I'm sure you do too.
Incredible.
Amazing. And then also I love Elon Musk. And so whenever they have a podcast, I'm watching that. So I watch it back and forth on my phone and then my Apple TV on YouTube. I was watching on YouTube and I was just kind of like eating something and watching it. And Lex Fridman just pauses to let Elon Musk answer a question. So specifically, he said, how long do you think it's going to take us to get to Mars? And Elon Musk is kind of like a quiet, kind of introverted kind of guy, and so is Lex Fridman. And they just stopped. Like, it was just this silence on the air for like 20 seconds. And I was like, my TV, like, what happened? And I could still see that my TV is moving. I'm like, oh, he's just waiting. And so Elon Musk goes like, He sits there and thinks about it. And it was a 21-second pause. Like, imagine we did 21 seconds of dead air. And so on podcast, whenever I posted that video, most people were like, I was listening to my podcast, I had to like press start, stop. And I was like, what the fuck's going on? But I really respected that Lex Fridman just let Elon Musk think for that long, even though it was so uncomfortably long. He just let him think. And at the end, he just goes, best case 5 years, worst case 10 years. And he just, like, I don't know what went through his head of like what he's allowed to say, what he's going to say, like if all this goes well. Like, it was just fascinating to watch like all that stuff happen in his head and just give this simple answer. So what I did, I was like, that was a cool moment. I just knew it. And so I screen captured that and put a little countdown timer on it and posted it.
How'd you screen capture it?
Camtasia.
Camtasia's the tool.
Yeah. Although I have fully moved over to Descript.
Okay.
now for video editing.
Cool.
But I use Camtasia for that, just to capture the thing on my laptop. I put a little countdown timer that I made with, if you type in stopwatch on Google, there's like a little stopwatch. I screen recorded the stopwatch and put that on there. I was like a dumb way to do it. And then I put little titled captions. There wasn't that much, actual thing. And I posted that, and it just like for the next few days just kept going and going, like 1,000 likes per hour. Just keep going and going. Like Grimes liked it.
Really?
Elon's girlfriend at the time. All these cool people liked it. Yeah.
Did anyone cool reach out to you that you could speak about who saw the tweet? Or
the funny thing is, and we were talking about this at the Twitter party yesterday, everyone in there has gone viral at some point.
Yeah.
And so what you notice is like those tweets actually don't bring in all that much, anything. So if I actually look at the amount of subscribers, it had millions of impressions and maybe like, I don't know, 14 signups or something like that.
Really? For your newsletter?
Yeah. No, for my followers.
Followers.
Specifically.
14 followers? But that can't be right.
That's what's crazy about it. So, but here's the thing. When you look at my stats, I definitely went up by a few hundred.
Yeah.
But what happens is people look at that tweet, then look at my other tweets, and then subscribe. That's how it works. But for the most part, like all the comments and stuff you get are just garbage. They're like, oh, Elon sucks or whatever. And you're like, how is this helpful?
Yeah.
But for the most part, I don't think that the going viral thing was like anything crazy. I like it more. Like, honestly, I get so excited when I put up some random tweet, like Balaji Srivastava likes it. I'm like, he read my words. I just get really excited about that.
We're going to clip that and send it to him.
Yeah. Yeah. I get far more excited when like someone thinks like something I said was cool. Because what I put out that went viral was Elon Musk and Lex Fridman.
Mm-hmm.
And it was timely also. I did it like right after that podcast. I must have been like the 500th person to watch on YouTube.
Yeah.
I was early on
it. It's funny because Derek Sivers said that he'd rather be respected by 10 people he admires versus a million people he doesn't care about.
I think so. I think social media is showing that's true.
Yeah, and that's similar to what you're talking about with Balaji and just it's so cool because what I really respect is people's minds, and that's what I'm getting access to with this podcast and talking to them. And it's like those are the people who I appreciate so much, and so to have them and sit down with them for an hour is like the best thing in the world.
Yeah, so I think if I wrote something and someone liked it, like that,
it would feel better. And
that's far better than like, okay, got a lot of views and stuff. I think overall, I don't think it did anything though. Yeah, other than it is a good story. It is cool. Yeah, so that is cool. And then it's kind of funny because like friends would text me and be like, dude, you're going viral. Like that was fun.
Well, let's talk about one you actually wrote then and one that is from your mind and maybe got some more love. But on May 31st, 2021, so almost over a year ago, you said, my Protect from Inflation kit. Hold stocks, Google, Amazon, Apple, hold some crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum, own a hard asset, house or rental, own piece of businesses, hold S&P 500 fund, hold China S&P 500 fund, and don't sell for 10 years.
Yeah.
And that went pretty viral as well.
Yeah, I still talk about that all the time.
You still agree with all those?
I literally put it in my Friday. It's Thursday right now, and Friday that's in there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Go figure.
There's no change. I was trying to think. So I actually put a podcast out on this. I was just trying to podcast a little bit more and tell stories. I went through a day trading phase in college. Like I think every male in their life goes through a day trading phase. You're like, stuff goes down. I could buy it what's down and goes up and then sell it. And so I was doing this. I was waking up when the bell rang for the stock market and shit like that and trading. Like I had a few $1,000 extra in college. And by the end of the year and after capital gains, like you really don't make all that much money. And I started reading Warren Buffett and he talks about like, okay, I don't know what's going to happen in the short run. It doesn't matter. There's no way to tell. It is irrational. I know rationally that if a company's really kicking ass and making a lot of money over the next 10 years, it's going to go up, right? And so I was like, I like that. I like that thought. And so I remember there's this thing called Enron, where there's a collapse of this giant company, a big Fortune 500 company. And the next day it was bankrupt. It went out of business. Everyone in the company got fired.
Wow.
And so there's another company called Dynegy. And I grew up in Houston, so I knew all these companies. And there's a company called Dynegy, gas transportation company, boring as shit. It just makes pipelines and it puts natural gas from here to there. That's it. And it's a steady company. They make $600 million a quarter. And they got somehow, one of their execs did some funny business, right? So they got a $2 billion fine after the Enron thing. Now, this company makes $600 million a quarter, times 4, $2.4 billion a year. So they got a $2 billion fine. So in my estimation, I'm like, okay, so they're aggressively paying off this fine. That's why their revenue in the media was $0. Everyone's like, Dynegy went to zero. They're the next one to go bankrupt. So the stock dropped like from $30 to like $1.
Oh my God.
And I remember thinking like, I read the report though. Like they still make the same amount of money. They're actually doing something good. They're paying off the fine. They're using every last cent they make to pay off that fine. So in 1 year, they'll be debt free. Isn't that like what you should do? And I started realizing that the reporters and quote unquote analysts were like 22-year-olds that were recent grads that don't own stocks. And these are the people reporting on these stocks. I was like, you idiots. Like, am I stupid or do I not see this? And I was using the Warren Buffett thing of like, just read all the reports. And sure enough, I just sat down and read these boring reports and it showed that they were fine. The company was absolutely fine with the exception of this. The day that they started making profit again, which I predicted, I was just like, they'll make 200 million profit on this quarter. Like, it's so obvious. The stock went up like 12x.
Wow.
And then it went up another double from there. It went back to its normal level when they reported full earnings again. I was like, that was so easy to see. And that's when I became like a Buffett believer. I made more money on that one stock trade than I ever did with all the day trading combined. And no stress. I didn't do anything. I read once, I made one trade, and that's it. That's it. I didn't do anything. And from there, that's when I kind of got into like investing in like, okay, what's going to be around for sure in 10 years? So the stocks that I mentioned on
Copywriting Course.
I don't know. You may not know. Maybe AI just takes it all over.
Sure.
But what I thought was bare metal of the internet will probably still exist, right? No matter what. So that means, so Amazon runs roughly 30% of the USA internet, the Western world internet. Google runs another 30%, Microsoft another 30%. Apple hardware is everywhere. I'm like, those companies likely will be around in 10 years. Apple may not be competitive in the consumer space, but sure as hell probably be competitive in the enterprise space. Much like Microsoft, still one of the biggest companies in the world. You think like Microsoft's dead? Wrong. It's one of the biggest cash generating machines on the planet. So I run, I just invest in bare metal internet companies. That's it. Like that are actually running servers. And then the other thing is like Bitcoin, Ethereum, those are probably going to be the winners of the crypto thing. All the other coins, I don't know, take a gamble, do whatever you want. But
Not investment advice.
Those two are probably it, right? Probably, most likely.
At where we're currently at in August of 2022. That's the way it seems.
Yeah, and I saw the inflation numbers, and then also interest rates when I bought my house were 2.6%, and so the interest at the same time was 12%. That was reported, not even real. So, sorry, inflation. My bad.
Yeah.
And so I was like, wait, so it's bad to hold cash, but good to hold debt right now. You actually, so it's a topsy-turvy world. So I bought a house and got the highest loan for the lowest interest that I could up to a certain degree. So most of the house is paid off, but I got this specific type of loan that's very low interest. But and then I also wanted land, so the house has land on it.
Wow.
So that was my protect from inflation kit, and that just somehow like it was so simple that I think people really resonated with it. Because otherwise, people are like, "Well, what do I invest in?" And I'm like, "Well, here it is, in one tweet."
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's just like it's very simple. And what I also liked in that story that you talked about with was it Dynasto?
Dynegy.
Yeah. What I liked about that was George Mack said something really interesting once, which was like, when I saw the media reporting about a topic that I actually knew a lot about, I stopped believing the media about everything because I realized, oh my God, they got this wrong about something that I know deeply. That's my expertise. I think it was something around media or Facebook. He was like, how could they know anything at all? And I thought that was an interesting insight. And you clearly had the same experience with looking and reading the stocks and seeing like, oh, wow, like I actually read the reports. You didn't.
You know what's more impactful? I know the reporters.
Really? Like personally?
Yeah, they're stupid people like me. They don't know anything. And a lot of times they're a reporter. They make like $30K a year. They don't know anything.
Yeah.
And so that's when I was just like, wait, I'm listening to this person. Whereas like now you have access to like listening to Ray Dalio speak.
Or Balaji.
Or Warren Buffett, like the person themselves. Like I'm just going to listen to them. I'm going to bypass the 23-year-old that's summarizing their words run by an editor.
Yeah, it's like the access to information, like we were talking about before, is unprecedented, and that's
crazy.
The most brilliant minds pop up, and we get access to Lex Fridman. Like, how crazy is that? We get access to Elon. Like, it blows my mind.
I do, because I watch a lot of interviews on YouTube on my Apple TV, and I'm just like, because you got a big TV, they're almost like life size. They're like, I'm like listening to these two people talk like I'm in the room. Like that's nuts, and it's free. It's kind of wild. And so listening to people like that has been very impactful in life, especially people like Warren Buffett, where you're just like, he kind of walks the walk, right? And like his method to get rich was not like anything insane. It's like pretty simple and boring. And I kind of like that.
Yeah. So I'd like to end this off with a few deep questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Since you are such a deep thinker and you do spend a lot of time thinking about death and you do spend a lot of time thinking about happiness, to me, that's a deep thinker.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
But when you're at the end of your life, what do you want people to remember you by?
To be honest, like I always answer this question. I don't think it's a good answer. When I'm done, I'm done. It's at the end. The chapter of Neville has closed and the next generation can take off.
But the difference there is that you're still going to be remembered in people's minds
for a while.
For at least one generation if you have kids, 2 generations if they have kids.
Fair.
And so people think that when you leave the room, you're gone, but you're not. You'll leave the room and we'll be done with this, but I'll still be thinking about you. So you're not actually dead. And so people do have a memory of you, even if you're not there.
Fair. Good point. Good point. I take that back. Well, in that case, I would just not want to fuck it up for the next generation. How about that? It's like a credit score. It starts perfect. You just don't want to fuck it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that would be the ultimate goal. Just like at least neutral, if not good. Yeah. I just want to be like a happy person, focus on friends and family. I don't think I want to be known for much more than that. And in my personal opinion, I've never focused on legacy too much. I don't know why. Like I feel like I'm supposed to, but I don't.
Why are you supposed to?
It just feels like, what do you want to be known for? And like my inner thought is like, I don't know, nothing. Like just like when I'm dead, I'm dead.
Yeah.
Like I'm gone. Like it's the next person's turn. Like I'm done.
Yeah. But
the book is closed.
I do think we also do leave things with people. And I think
that's true.
And it's important to think about that as well, because you can have people remember you and live by, like for me, when we're gone with this conversation, I'm going to take a bit of your carefree, happy attitude into my next thing that I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, like, also death isn't for certain November 17, 2067. It could be, get hit by the proverbial bus on the way out of here, right?
That's right.
So you don't know when that's going to happen. So I think every moment you just live like you do and do good things and like, hopefully you get remembered well. I also think there is like an immortal aspect of it. Like I've written a book. I put some of my words on paper. And then also, I mean, this gets a little out there with the tech stuff. But you know how like AI could kind of just like replicate your voice, all that stuff?
Yeah.
It's coming to the thing where it's like, if I watch enough of your videos, I could probably decide how you act in certain situations.
Yeah.
And an AI will be remarkably good at that. So maybe in some weird way, you can have little Neville AI in the future because I've recorded enough video and audio of myself.
It's likely that will be the case, considering
that's not far off.
The where they've gone already is pretty crazy.
Yeah, so maybe I'll be immortal in some weird way like that, but I don't think that's the goal. I think my goal is to live this ride out. I got 85 years. I'm going to make the most of it, and then the book is closed. Yeah, it's
fair enough.
I step off the stage. That's it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, what do you think is something you've mastered, and what is something you're still learning?
Oh man, mastered? I don't know. I'd like to think I'm still learning at all stages. Like I think even copywriting, there's like, I could just say like, oh, I'm good at that. It's like, well, I'm still learning all the time. Right. I just got on Twitter in 2020. I've been on Twitter, but I just use it as a spam feed essentially to like promote my blog posts, not the way you're supposed to use Twitter. And so that's a whole new way of writing, right? These like little bite-sized things. I used to write really long form stuff, and the world has changed with phones and social media to where it's like you can put out a ton of small little bite-sized things, see what hits, and then write longer form things. The way that writing and creative processes have evolved is different, and it's always different. So I don't know if I've ever mastered anything. I'm always a little, except if someone's like in tennis or something like that.
Why tennis?
Or let's say running. Like if someone's like really good at running, I guess you could say they've mastered running if they're like the number one person. But I think there's always stuff to learn. Yeah, I don't know if I've mastered anything. I think I'm like decently good at certain things.
Okay.
I'm decently good at giving people feedback on copy. I'm decently good at like when I go on office hours, I think I do a pretty good job. I think I'm getting better at podcasting on my own, like telling a story off the top of my head and making it interesting on the spot. I'm trying to get better at that. But I don't know. It seems so braggadocious to say I've mastered something.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then my final question is, what's the adversity in your life that you've had to consistently overcome?
Oh man, I mean, I was, grew up in a pretty privileged life. Dude, this is so funny you asked this question. This was my high school to college to go to UT. They asked this question: what adversity have you overcome? And I was like, I'm like a 17-year-old that grew up in the burbs in like an upper middle class family. Like what? I had great parents. I had a great community. I have tons of friends. Like what adversity have I possibly faced? And the only thing is like, I remember what I wrote in that essay was my parents made me go to Philmont for my Eagle Scout thing. And you had to like do this long hike. And that was really hard. That was the hardest thing I'd ever done as a kid. And then also just like seeing like people in India just like living a different way, although I didn't live that way, just seeing it. And just remember like thinking like, that's interesting that's a thing. That was the only adversity. I don't know that I've encountered a lot of adversity.
Interesting. And do you think you're better off for not encountering adversity?
I think I've done a good job of exposing myself to people who have gone through adversity by listening to lots of podcasts, by reading lots of books. I remember reading biographies about Jay Leno, Jackie Chan, all these people. Like Jackie Chan had this crazy hard life that he grew up with. And I was just like, well, I just didn't know that. And then now I know that. And so I appreciate things that way. But I think compared to our ancestors and stuff, my life has been easy. Yeah, I don't think I've faced that much adversity outside of the normal experience. I hate to like say that, but I think it's true.
I appreciate your honesty and your truth. It's really wonderful to witness.
Yeah, everyone has these like crazy, like, I was broke 2 years ago, now I'm rich. I'm always skeptical of that because I'm like, wait, we were broke for all those other years. I want the guy who's just like rich all the time, who's been doing well for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I wish I had that story, but I don't.
No, it's fair. And I've enjoyed this so much. I love spending time with you. I love learning from you.
Let me ask you a question.
Go for it.
Do I talk too much on the podcast?
No.
Okay.
Not at all.
Yeah, I'm always self-conscious about that.
You are.
Yeah.
No, you don't at all. It's perfect because I feel like your mind goes in so many different ways. And that's
See, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
It's amazing as a host because I can latch on to anything I want.
Well, one thing I've always like, I remember in conversations like a long time ago, go to all these meetups when we were young. My brain would just be so fast, like in conversation. I like have something to say every second, and I had to like learn. And I'd see people do that weren't me. Like outside, I'd see like that person interrupting someone who's just quieter. I'm like, what an asshole. And I remember thinking like, damn, I do that. Like I totally do that.
No, I didn't.
I know I do it. And so I never want to be like that guy. I was self-conscious about it. So.
Well, there's no reason, at least around me, for you to feel self-conscious about it because...
Nice. Yeah. Dude, well, thanks for having me then.
Where can we send people to connect with you further?
Copywritingcourse.com. You can find me there, at NevMed on Twitter. On YouTube, you can type in Neville Medhora and you'll find me. Really, I have a pretty unique name. You can just Google me. It's pretty easy. Also, yeah, so if you go to my Twitter, I'll have usually a little link tree, kind of beacons bio.
We'll put a bunch in the show notes as well.
Yeah, so I'd say Twitter and Copywriting Course is where all my stuff goes. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Neville.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.